All right, let's talk about James Bradberry, the cornerback. Justin, he's 6'1", 212 pounds. He's going to turn 27 years old in the second week of camp. Picked in the second round in 2016 by our guy, GM Dave Gettleman from his time in Carolina. Justin, the Giants needed a cornerback after they cut Janoris Jenkins. We didn't know if they'd be able to address in the draft with a guy like Okudah when there are so many other needs. We are big on the Byron Jones train, but I am excited because the Giants signed James Bradberry to a 3-year, $43.5 million deal. Justin, if after 2022 we wanted to get out of that contract for the third year, it'd only be $3 million in dead cap, which would mean $11 million in savings. But I don't think we're going to have to do that, Justin, because I really like James Bradberry as a player.
Yeah, I hope not. Giants were smart this offseason with a lot of their free agent acquisitions that they're not committed to really anything long-term. But James Bradberry is undoubtedly the offseason acquisition, at least free agent-wise, that we're most confident in and that we're most excited to see. Honestly, Bobby, it's just a question of a few things, and what we're going to get into right now is James Bradberry that really much of an upgrade versus Janoris Jenkins? We're going from one free agent corner to another. And how does James Bradberry kind of fit in Patrick Graham's system? And we'll talk about that. But Bobby, let's get maybe into some numbers. And I know you watched a lot of James Bradberry. So let's really get into the meat of who this guy is as a player.
Yeah. So advanced stats, and these they're getting better. These type of stats are getting better, but they're not 100% perfect. But they're pretty good for the cornerback position. In 2019. Quarterbacks facing him were 59 for 97, which is 59.8%, 644 yards, 1 touchdown, and 3 interceptions. In 2018, they were 50 for 113, 44.2%, which is elite. That's like best 3 in the league right there for 8, but more yards, 802 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 1 interception. So the TD interception ratio and yards were not as good, but the completion percentage was 15 points better. Justin, what are your thoughts on James Bradberry?
Well, first and most significant, I think maybe kind of just sticking with the numbers in terms of how it relates to our thoughts. James Bradberry played the NFC South. He's played in the NFC South for a few years, and he's done very, very well against the NFC South. Now, I think there's a huge difference, and I think you're a football fan, you know this, that playing a cornerback and playing as a secondary player in the NFC South is a very, very difficult thing to do because each of those teams in that division, they have a pretty elite wide receiver. Julio Jones with the Falcons, Mike Evans with the Bucks, even Chris Godwin last year too, and Michael Thomas with the New Orleans Saints. It's not like playing cornerback in the NFC East where, Amari Cooper's kind of average, Alshon Jeffries, and then Terry McLaurin just came onto the scene last year. So before that, you can argue that Janoris Jenkins in those divisional games didn't really have the biggest challenge. So when comparing numbers, even though James Bradberry's numbers and Janoris Jenkins' numbers, their stats look similar in terms of their advanced passing stats, I think James Bradberry is much more impressive because of who he went up against. So Julio Jones, game 1 last year, 5 catches for 64 yards. Julio Jones, game 2 last year against James Bradberry, 4 catches, 28 yards. Mike Evans, game 1, 1 catch, 16 yards. Game 2, 4 for 48 yards, and I believe one of those catches in that game 2 was a pretty big 15 to 20 yard gainer. So the rest of those pretty darn good. Michael Thomas, who he did very, very well against, very, very well.
2 interceptions against Mike Evans too, by the way.
Yeah, yes, and then Michael Thomas, who he did very well against, and we all know how dominant Michael Thomas was. Game 1, 7 catches, 49 yards. Game 2, 5 catches for 29 yards. Bobby, that's
even
pretty darn good.
DeAndre Hopkins is just like he dominated his talent. And, Blake Martinez I thought was a good signing. I definitely wasn't excited about it just because, honestly, I didn't want to invest a lot of money in that position unless the guy's elite, and I don't think Blake Martinez is that. But, man, I was excited about the Bradberry signing, like just full bloom love with it. Obviously, I wanted Byron Jones, and Byron Jones is a better player. But I love this James Bradberry signing. And I think the thing that stinks about it, though, Justin, and I keep on bringing in Janoris Jenkins, is he is better than Janoris Jenkins. Like, there's no doubt in my mind, at least what Janoris Jenkins was last year. But it's not like a huge improvement.
Right.
So he's the biggest addition, but he's not a huge improvement to what we had last year. Like, if we had Jenkins and Bradberry both on opposite sides, then I'd be excited. But the fact that he's replacing someone I liked in Jenkins – I know Jenkins had a bad Tampa Bay game and people got mad at his few missed tackles, but I thought Jenkins was solid. That's why it doesn't make me want to propel the defense to the next level.
Yeah, and also I do get a little concerned about the targets. I understand you're going up against elite wide receivers, especially last year. I mean, 113 targets he had in 2018. So you're going up against these elite NFC South wide receivers every single year. Those teams are going to want to target their guys. So it's a balance in my brain right now with how I'm evaluating Bradberry of like, yes, I'm concerned that quarterbacks feel the need to target him so many times because clearly they feel like their receivers are somewhat open. But as you were saying earlier, Bobby, the completion percentage was still pretty darn good despite a lot of targets. In even 2019, the completion percentage, 60%, that's not great, but it's not terrible. So,
but here's the way I look at it, Justin. No matter who, now I'm not even talking about Mike Evans, Julio Jones, and Michael Thomas. If your number one wide receiver had 59 catches for 644 yards and 1 touchdown, would you be happy with that season? It'd be pitiful. And that's what James Bradberry held his opponents to. That's the way I look at it. And like I said, I went through every single game of this guy's film, and I came away impressed. And a few things that I came away with. He's very good in man. Like, he's good at collapsing. He's not going to press you. Like, he's not going to come and press you, but he's very good in man. In zone coverage, he is unbelievably smart. He just doesn't make any mistakes in zone coverage. I think I counted like 1 mistake in like 10 games, and he just didn't make any. And he also knew when it's like, hey, I have an either-or decision, he would make the right decision in it. So there might be like a catch on his stat book, but he gave up a catch for 6 yards instead of one for 24 yards, and it seemed like our corners couldn't understand that last year in James Betcher's system. So that's huge. He follows the number one wide receiver around. Jenkins complained about that. Hopefully Graham lets him do that, and I believe he will. Like I said, he doesn't make any mental mistakes, and he's got adequate ball skills where Jones – but with Byron Jones, the question was, can this guy get interceptions? Because he didn't really have any.
Yeah, even the player profiler went into some of his target separation. I love talking about player separation. He was pretty good in the target separation too. Player profiler had him as 18th, allowing a little bit less than 1 yard of target separation per. I'm guessing they're analyzing that per play or per reception allowed. So that's pretty darn good as well, and especially considering how Carolina, and I didn't really like how Carolina actually allowed James Bradberry to play at certain points. I don't really feel James Bradberry, and add another Giants corner to the list who's not good with playing off ball. There would be times last year, even going up against Mike Evans, where it would be like a 4th and 1, and James Bradberry's playing 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. So, of course, Mike Evans is going to catch a little 2-yard route, and he's going to pick up the first down. And that's going to go against James Bradberry because he's the guy that's making the tackle, and he's the guy that's mopping up that play. But Patrick Graham, while Bobby mentioned that maybe he's not good at playing press and he's not, really, he doesn't prefer to put his hands on guys at the line of scrimmage, man-to-man coverage, Patrick Graham is playing that 50% of the time in 2019. He played press man 481 times. That was the 5th most. And cover one with that single high safety 43% of the time. So I like that, number one. I like that because I think Bradberry, that's his strength, man-to-man and being sticky to a wide receiver, but I'm also worried about, hey, we're going to need help. The cornerback number 2, the nickel corner, that single high safety is going to have to help those two guys, and Bradberry may be on an island, and that kind of concerns me.
See, that's the thing that doesn't concern me is him being on an island. Like, on a defense where we have questions, inside linebacker, edge, cornerback 2, and nickel, which is the biggest, I am totally fine being James Bradberry. You go take care of that side.
Yep.
I am completely fine. I think an issue we ran into in 2020 was like the Bears and the Packers put their number one wide receiver in the slot and they abused us. Bradberry can follow his guy around. So on a defense where there's a lot of question marks, to me, Bradberry is the guy I'm the most confident in. Well, actually, no, the defensive tackles I am. But yeah. Bradberry I am extremely confident in.
But cornerback is much more important. Defensive tackles are important. Don't get me wrong. Generating interior pressure. I'm not one of those guys that says this doesn't matter, that doesn't matter, besides running backs. But cornerback, very important. Cornerback, very important to passing league. And because Bradberry has this pedigree and he has the resume of going up against the best guys, and he has that production. There's not even like deep digging stats that I could do about more cornerback metrics or something like that. That speaks for itself. The resume speaks for itself, and the results speak for itself right there. Be excited about James Bradberry. I think my concerns come from I'm just worried about the defense overall. I'm very excited about James Bradberry.
Yeah, I have the utmost confidence in James Bradberry. Anything else you got?
No, rock and roll. Oh, fun fact. Here's a fun fact about James Bradberry. Brings it full circle with Josh Norman. We don't like Josh Norman. James Bradberry was the guy that took Josh Norman's job once he left town. And you can argue, he came in, did pretty well. Josh Norman, not the same corner since. So, system cornerback, Josh Norman, not that good.
Don't call him a system corner because that means James Bradberry entered the same system.
No, stop it. He's the exception.
We appreciate you guys. Next time, we'll see you. Until then, let's go Big Blue.